In the wake of great wars, the galaxy does not find peace. It finds an echo. 4,000 years before the rise of the Galactic Empire, the Republic was healing from such an echo, a conflict known as the Great Sith War. Exar Kun, a fallen Jedi, and Ulic Qel-Droma, a tragic hero, had carved a path of destruction that left worlds scarred and the Jedi Order shaken. The Republic, though victorious, was exhausted. Its military was depleted, its treasury strained, and its political will fractured. This exhaustion created a vacuum, a quiet space in the outer rim where new powers could fester. On the fringes of known space, the warrior clans of the Mandalorians, long a rival to the Republic, began to stir. They were a people forged in conflict, defined by the crucible of battle. Humiliated by their defeat in the Great Sith War, they sought a leader who could restore their honor and give their warrior culture a singular purpose. They found him in a town warrior of immense size and brutal cunning, a figure who would come to be known only as Mandalore the Ultimate. Under his unifying banner, the disparate Mandalorian clans transformed. They became a disciplined, expansionist force, driven by a neo-crusader ideology. Their belief was simple and absolute. The strong had the right, even the duty, to conquer the weak. The Republic, in its perceived state of decay, was the ultimate prize. They began their campaign not with a direct assault, but with a slow, creeping advance, testing the Republic's borders, absorbing independent worlds, and committing atrocities that served as both a warning and a recruitment tool. Yet, unseen by the Jedi and the Republic's Senate, a far older and more patient power watched from the shadows. Beyond the galactic rim in the unknown regions, the remnants of the true Sith Empire waited. Its immortal emperor, a being of unfathomable power and malice, had orchestrated his own grand design. He saw the Mandalorians not as an ultimate threat, but as a perfect instrument. He manipulated Mandalore the Ultimate, subtly guiding his hand, pushing his armies toward Republic space. The Emperor's goal was not a Mandalorian victory, but a galactic war of attrition, a war that would bleed the Republic dry, that would shatter the Jedi Order, and that would test the galaxy for force sensitives strong enough to be turned. The stage was set for a conflict that would redefine the era. The Mandalorians were the visible threat, the coming storm. But the true storm, the one that would birth legends and monsters, was the one no one, not even the Jedi Masters on Coruscant, could yet see. It was a storm that would be met by two Jedi Knights, whose names would become inseparable from the chaos to come: Revan and his closest friend, Malak. Their story would not be one of simple heroism, but of defiance, of a fall into darkness, and a journey through the heart of war that would forever change the galaxy. Chapter 1. The Cathar, Atrocity. The question of when a war truly begins is often debated by historians. Is it the first shot fired? The first formal declaration? Or is it the first act of barbarism that makes the conflict inevitable? For the Mandalorian Wars, many point to the devastation of the planet Cathar. Here, the Mandalorians, under the direct command of Mandalore, the Ultimate's most feared lieutenant, Cassius Fett, revealed the true nature of their crusade. It was not merely a war of conquest. It was a war of extermination. The strategic context was clear. The Mandalorians were consolidating their power in the Outer Rim, and Cathar, a world inhabited by a proud feline species, stood in their path. But the Mandalorian assault was not a conventional invasion. It was a calculated act of terror. The Mandalorian fleet blockaded the planet, trapping its population, before landing ground forces. They did not seek surrender. They herded the Cathar people, civilian and warrior alike, into the open, and then, from orbit, they unleashed a storm of nuclear fire. Millions were incinerated in an instant. The planet's surface was scorched, its biosphere collapsing into a toxic ruin. One Jedi, a woman who had survived the slaughter, brought the horrific truth back to the Jedi Council. She presented a recording of the event, a silent, damning testament to the Mandalorian creed. Yet, the Council hesitated, still reeling from the memory of Exar Kun, a Jedi who had led so many of their own astray. They were paralyzed by the fear of repeating past mistakes. They counseled patience, meditation, and a reliance on the Senate to find a diplomatic solution. They forbade any Jedi from intervening in the escalating border conflicts. This inaction was untenable to a growing faction of younger Jedi Knights. They saw the Council's caution not as wisdom, but as moral cowardice. At the forefront of this dissenting group was Revan, a Jedi of prodigious talent. Revan possessed a strategic mind and a charismatic presence that drew others to him. He argued passionately that the Jedi's duty was to defend the innocent, that to stand by while the galaxy burned was a betrayal of their most sacred oaths. Beside him stood his staunchest ally, Malak, a powerful and physically imposing knight, whose conviction was matched only by his impatience for debate. The analysis of the Council's decision reveals an institution trapped by its own history. They feared that direct involvement would lead to Jedi falling to the dark side, their emotions corrupted by the passions of war. Their logic was that a single fallen Jedi, like Exar Kun, could do more damage than any external enemy. What they failed to account for was the moral cost of inaction, the message it sent to the galaxy, and more importantly, the message it sent to their own knights. For Revan and Malak, the massacre at Cathar was not a political problem to be solved through committees. It was a call to action. They saw the Mandalorians not as a distant threat, but as an existential one. The Council's decree was a line drawn in the sand, and Revan, with Malak at his side, was preparing to cross it. The Great Schism within the Jedi Order had begun, not in a temple debate chamber, but in the ashes of a world that had cried out for help, only to be met with silence. Chapter 2. The Revanchist Schism. The Jedi Council's mandate of non-intervention created a crisis of conscience within the Order. To many, it felt like an abdication of responsibility. The central question became, what is the purpose of a guardian who refuses to guard? It was into this simmering discontent that Revan stepped, not as a rebel, but as a leader offering a different interpretation of the Jedi Code. He did not preach anger or hate, but responsibility. His argument was a powerful one that compassion without action was meaningless. This was the birth of the Revanchist movement. The name itself, meaning one who returns, was a declaration of intent. Revan and his followers intended to return the Jedi to their rightful place as the protectors of the Republic. The movement began quietly, with whispered conversations in the halls of the Dantooine and Coruscant temples. Revan, with his natural charisma and intellectual brilliance, articulated the frustrations of many younger knights. Malak, with his imposing presence and unwavering loyalty to Revan, gave the movement a sense of strength and resolve. The turning point came when Revan, wearing the mask of the fallen Cathar woman who had brought news of the genocide, made a public appeal. He declared his intention to defy the Council and go to war. He asked for any who believed in his cause to join him. The response was overwhelming. A significant portion of the Jedi Order, from knights to Padawans, and even a few sympathetic masters, flocked to his banner. They were the Jedi Crusaders, a splinter faction dedicated to saving the Republic, with or without the Council's blessing. The Council was horrified. They saw Revan as a new Exar Kun, a charismatic leader leading the Order's best and brightest down a path they believed could only end in darkness. They threatened excommunication. They pleaded for patience, but their authority had been broken. Revan's logic was too compelling, the Mandalorian threat too immediate. The Republic, desperate for leadership as its own military faltered, welcomed the Revanchists with open arms. The Senate officially granted Revan command of 1/3 of the Republic fleet, giving his Jedi-led forces the legitimacy the Council had denied them. The strategic and political analysis of this moment is critical. Revan's success was not just due to his charisma, it was a failure of the established leadership. The Jedi Council, by focusing inward on preventing a potential fall to the dark side, had ignored the immediate, tangible darkness consuming the Outer Rim. Revan offered a solution, a proactive path that resonated with the core Jedi tenet of service. He filled a leadership vacuum that both the Council and the Republic Senate had allowed to form. With a fleet at his command and an army of Jedi at his back, Revan was no longer just a dissenting voice. He was a supreme military commander. The schism was complete. The Jedi Order was fighting on two fronts, one against the Mandalorians in the bloody battles of the Outer Rim, and a quieter, more painful one against itself. A war of ideology that pitted master against student, tradition against necessity. The fate of the galaxy now rested on whether Revan's crusade would save the Republic or doom the Jedi who had followed him. Chapter 3. The Art of Victory. Revan's entry into the Mandalorian Wars marked a fundamental shift in the conflict. Before his arrival, the Republic military had been consistently outmaneuvered. The Mandalorians, led by the tactical genius of Mandalore the Ultimate, fought with a ferocity and coordination that the Republic's conventional strategies could not counter. The Republic was losing ships, losing worlds, and losing hope. The question hanging over the war effort was simple. How do you defeat an enemy who lives for battle? Revan's answer was profound. You must understand them better than they understand themselves. This became the core of Revan's strategy. He did not engage the Mandalorians with brute force alone. He studied their history, their culture, their warrior code. He understood that their greatest strength, their aggressive, honor-bound pursuit of glorious combat, was also their greatest weakness. They were predictable. They would always accept a challenge, always commit to a decisive battle, and always press an advantage. Revan used this predictability against them. His campaigns were masterpieces of military art. At the Battle of Serroco, where Republic forces were pinned down, Revan orchestrated a daring flanking maneuver, luring the bulk of the Mandalorian fleet into a trap, while his forces relieved the besieged planet. He employed tactics considered unorthodox, even dishonorable by traditional military standards. He used feints, targeted strikes against supply lines, and exploited every bit of intelligence, often gathered by his Jedi forces, operating behind enemy lines. Malak served as his fist, leading shock assaults and brutal boarding actions, a perfect complement to Revan's scalpel. A key set piece of his strategic genius was the defense of the Duro sector. The Mandalorians, seeking to cripple Republic shipbuilding, launched a massive assault on the system's orbital cities. Instead of meeting them head-on, Revan allowed them to commit their forces to the planetary assault. Then, with his fleet hidden in the sector's dense asteroid fields, he sprang his trap. He cut off their retreat, turning the Mandalorian fleet's aggressive formation into a fatal liability. The battle was a resounding victory, saving a critical industrial hub and demonstrating that Revan could not only match the Mandalorians, but outthink them. The analysis of Revan's military leadership is revealing. Unlike the Jedi Masters who preached detachment, Revan embraced a form of empathy, not for the Mandalorians' cruelty, but for their mindset. He learned to think like his enemy. This allowed him to anticipate their moves and counter them with devastating efficiency. Crucially, Revan was also a master of logistics and morale. He ensured his troops were well supplied and that every victory, no matter how small, was broadcast across the Republic to bolster public support. He was not just a Jedi general, he was a symbol of hope. With each victory, however, Revan and his followers drifted further from the Jedi Council's teachings. The necessities of war demanded difficult choices, actions that blurred the line between light and dark. They were winning, but the cost was mounting, not just in lives, but in the slow erosion of the ideals they had set out to defend. The path to victory was clear, but where it would ultimately lead them was becoming increasingly uncertain. The war had a momentum of its own, and it was pulling them all toward a final, cataclysmic confrontation. Chapter 4. The Final Strategy. As the war raged on, Revan's victories pushed the Mandalorians back, reclaiming lost territory and bleeding their seemingly endless armies. Yet Mandalore the Ultimate remained a formidable and elusive foe. He adapted, he learned, and he continued to command the fanatical loyalty of his people. Revan knew that a conventional war of attrition, even one the Republic was now winning, would be too costly. He needed a decisive end, a single battle that would not just defeat the Mandalorians, but break their spirit entirely. The question became, where could such a battle be forced? The answer, Revan discovered, lay in the enemy's past. Through intelligence gathered by his Jedi infiltrators and the interrogation of high-ranking Mandalorian prisoners, he learned of the ancient Sith. He pieced together a hidden history, a connection between the Mandalorian Crusaders and the Sith Lords of a bygone era. He learned that Mandalore, the Ultimate, was not acting alone. He was being guided, subtly manipulated by his Sith patrons, who had directed him to search for a Sith superweapon hidden on the planet Rekiad. This was the key. Revan now understood his enemy's secret objective. He allowed Mandalore to find the Sith artifacts on Rekiad, creating the illusion of a Republic intelligence failure. He then leaked false information, a carefully constructed trail of breadcrumbs, suggesting that the true prize, a trove of ancient Sith knowledge and power, was located in the uncharted Malachor system. It was a masterful deception. Mandalore, driven by the whispers of his Sith masters and his own ambition, took the bait. He gathered the full might of the Mandalorian Grand Armada and set a course for Malachor V. The strategic set piece for this final act was not a battlefield, but a secret project. On Revan's orders, the Republic's brightest engineers, under the guidance of a brilliant Jedi technician, constructed a weapon of unimaginable power, the Mass Shadow Generator. It was not a conventional weapon that fired lasers or missiles. It was a gravitational anomaly device, designed to amplify the mass of a celestial body to catastrophic levels, creating gravitational forces so intense they could crush entire fleets. The weapon was secretly transported to Malachor V and positioned in orbit, a silent arbiter of the battle to come. Revan's analysis of the situation was cold and calculating. He knew that luring the Mandalorians to Malachor V was not enough. To ensure their complete annihilation, he had to commit a significant portion of his own fleet, commanded by the Jedi general who had designed the superweapon. He was sacrificing thousands of his own soldiers and a trusted friend to ensure the trap was irresistible. This was the dark calculus of total war, a moral compromise that the Jedi Council had feared. Revan believed it was a necessary price to pay to save the trillions of lives the war would otherwise consume. The pieces were in place. The Mandalorian Armada, the largest fleet ever assembled in the Outer Rim, was en route to Malachor V. The Republic fleet, led by Revan and Malak, moved to intercept them. And in the silent orbit of that forbidden world, the Mass Shadow Generator waited. The final, brutal chapter of the Mandalorian Wars was about to be written, not in blaster fire, but in the crushing gravity of a dying world. Chapter 5. The Maw of Malachor. The Malachor system was a place of ill repute, a name whispered in navigational charts as a system to be avoided. Its fifth planet, Malachor V, was a jagged, storm-wracked world with an unnerving presence in the Force. It was here that the Mandalorian Wars would reach their bloody climax. The stakes were absolute: the survival of the Republic, the fate of the Mandalorian people, and the souls of the Jedi who had chosen to fight. The battle began as the largest naval engagement the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Mandalorian Grand Armada, a sea of starships bristling with weaponry, descended upon the system. Revan's Republic fleet met them in the skies above Malachor V. The initial clash was ferocious. From the bridge of his command ship, Revan orchestrated the battle with preternatural calm. He committed his forces, drawing the Mandalorians deeper into the planet's gravity well, selling the illusion that this was the decisive battle they craved. Malak, leading the frontal assault, fought with a savage intensity, his ship carving a path through the enemy lines. On the planet's surface, a concurrent and equally brutal battle was unfolding. Revan himself led a contingent of Jedi and Republic troops to engage Mandalore the Ultimate in personal combat. This was a critical component of his strategy. By challenging the Mandalorian leader directly, Revan ensured that the entire enemy force would remain committed to the fight, their warrior code demanding they witness their leader's duel. The confrontation was legendary. Revan, the master strategist, faced Mandalore, the ultimate warrior. The duel was a clash of philosophies, as much as Blades, the cold precision of the Jedi, against the raw, honor-bound fury of the Mandalorian. The turning point was not the duel, but a signal. As the battle in orbit reached its zenith, with Republic and Mandalorian ships locked in a deadly embrace, Revan gave the order. The Jedi general in command of the support fleet, a woman who had followed Revan from the beginning, received her final command: activate the mass shadow generator. She knew what it meant. Her fleet was too close, locked in combat and unable to escape the weapon's radius. It was a sentence of death for herself and for every soul under her command. With grim resolve, she complied. The analysis of this moment reveals the depth of Revan's commitment to victory at any cost. He had created a tactical dilemma with no good outcome. He forced one of his most loyal followers to make an impossible choice: sacrifice herself and her troops, or allow the Mandalorians to escape and continue their war across the galaxy. It was a burden that would haunt the survivors, and a decision that marked Revan's definitive break from the traditional teachings of the Jedi. He was no longer just a protector, he was an architect of annihilation. As the mass shadow generator activated, a wave of gravitational energy erupted from the device. The space around Malachor V warped and twisted. Ships, both Republic and Mandalorian, were torn apart, their hulls groaning and collapsing under the impossible strain. The planet itself began to fracture, its crust ripped open by the forces unleashed upon it. Malachor V had become a graveyard, and the war was about to end in a silent, crushing scream. Chapter 6. The Echo of a Scream. The activation of the mass shadow generator was not an explosion. It was an implosion. Gravity, the fundamental force that holds the stars together, was turned into a weapon of absolute destruction. The space above Malachor V became a vortex, a swirling maw of gravitational tidal waves. Starships were not blasted apart. They were pulverized, compressed into dense, unrecognizable wreckage. The Mandalorian Grand Armada, the pride of their people and the terror of the Outer Rim, ceased to exist in a matter of moments. Along with it, a significant portion of the Republic fleet, sacrificed to spring the trap, was also annihilated. On the planet's surface, the effect was even more horrific. The gravitational shear stripped the atmosphere away, exposing the raw, dying rock to the vacuum of space. The immense forces created a wound in the Force itself, a deafening silence that echoed with the psychic scream of every life extinguished in orbit. For the Force-sensitive Jedi fighting on the ground, the experience was catastrophic. Many were driven instantly insane. Others were simply obliterated, their connection to the Force severed so violently that their bodies were destroyed. They became echoes, their pain forever imprinted on the broken world. In the midst of this cataclysm, Revan concluded his duel with Mandalore the Ultimate. He defeated the Mandalorian leader, and in his final moments, Mandalore revealed the truth. His war had not been his own. He spoke of a hidden Sith Lord who had manipulated him, who had tempted him with visions of power and glory, and who had used his people as a pawn in a much larger game. With his dying breath, he gave Revan the coordinates of the worlds where he had met this shadowy influence. Revan, standing on the precipice of a world he had just condemned, now understood that the war he had just won was merely a prelude. The immediate aftermath was one of grim necessity. Revan ordered the surviving Mandalorians disarmed. He did not execute them. Instead, he took Mandalore's mask, the symbol of leadership, and decreed that their warrior culture was broken until a new leader could arise to reclaim it. He took their weapons, their armor, and their ships, effectively ending their threat to the galaxy for generations. It was a victor's justice, decisive and absolute. The analysis of Malachor V's legacy shows it to be a profound turning point. For the galaxy, it was the end of a devastating war. For the Mandalorians, it was the beginning of a long exile. But for Revan, Malak, and the Jedi who survived, it was a fundamental trauma. They had looked into the abyss and used its own power to win. The dark side was no longer an abstract concept. It was a tool they had wielded. The echo of Malachor, the silent scream in the Force, would follow them. Revan, now in possession of a new and terrifying truth about a hidden Sith empire, knew his journey was not over. With Malak at his side, he took the remnants of his fleet and, without returning to the Republic, vanished into the unknown regions, following the path Mandalore had revealed. He went to hunt a monster, unaware that he was walking into a monster's embrace. Chapter 7. The Beckoning Void. The Republic celebrated the victory at Malachor V as a deliverance. Revan and Malak were hailed as the greatest heroes of the age, saviors who had stared down a galactic threat and won an impossible war. But the heroes did not return. As the victory parades marched through the boulevards of Coruscant, the fleet that had won the war, a vast armada of veteran soldiers and powerful Jedi, simply disappeared. They did not answer hails from the Republic. They did not report to the Jedi Council. They followed Revan into the deep, uncharted space of the unknown regions. The question that consumed both the Senate and the Jedi Temple was, why? To the galaxy at large, it seemed a bewildering act of abandonment. To the Jedi Council, it was the terrifying confirmation of their deepest fears that Revan, having embraced the passions of war, had broken from them completely. The truth was far more complex. Revan was not abandoning the Republic. He believed he was embarking on a mission to save it from a threat far greater than the Mandalorians. He was following the trail left by Mandalore the Ultimate, a path leading to the mysterious Sith influence that had orchestrated the entire war. This journey took them into a sector of space that was deliberately hidden, masked by stellar anomalies and navigational hazards that had kept it isolated for millennia. It was a region whispered about in ancient texts, the dominion of the true Sith Empire. Revan and Malak, leading a fleet of battle-hardened loyalists, pushed through these barriers. They were no longer Jedi Knights in the traditional sense. The war had changed them. They operated not with the contemplative patience of the Order, but with the grim efficiency of a military unit on a critical mission. The set piece of this voyage was the bridge of Revan's command ship, a space transformed from a military command center into one of obsessive research. Captured Mandalorian data, ancient star charts, and the final words of Mandalore were cross-referenced and analyzed. Revan, driven by a cold intellectual fire, pieced together the puzzle. He discovered the name of the ancient Sith capital world, Dromund Kaas. He learned of an empire that had survived its ancient defeat and had spent 1,000 years rebuilding its strength in secret, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The analysis of Revan's motivation during this period shows a man convinced of his own singular purpose. He believed that only he, having understood the nature of total war, could confront this new enemy. He trusted no one else, not the short-sighted politicians of the Senate, nor the dogmatic masters of the Jedi Council. He saw them as naive, incapable of understanding the scale of the threat. This conviction, born of victory and trauma, bordered on arrogance. He was the savior of the Republic, and he would save it again, on his own terms. His friend Malak, ever in his shadow, shared this conviction, but his was fueled less by strategic necessity and more by a growing hunger for power. As their fleet drew closer to the heart of the hidden empire, the influence of the dark side grew stronger. The void of the unknown regions was not empty. It was saturated with a cold, ancient malice. The Jedi who had followed Revan began to feel its pull. The echo of Malachor, the trauma they all shared, made them vulnerable. They were isolated, far from the light of the Jedi temples, and they were heading directly toward the source of a darkness that had been patiently waiting for them for a very long time. Chapter 8. The Shadow Throne. The journey through the unknown regions culminated in the discovery of Dromund Kaas, the capital of the hidden Sith Empire. What Revan and Malak found there was not a scattered cult of dark side acolytes, but a fully realized civilization built on principles of power, conquest, and fear. It was a vast, technologically advanced society that had thrived in isolation for a millennium, its cities shrouded in perpetual thunderstorms, its architecture designed to inspire dread and obedience. This was the empire that had manipulated the Mandalorians, the power that had patiently waited while the Republic weakened itself. At the heart of this empire sat its ruler, the Sith Emperor. He was not a mere Dark Lord, but a being of immense antiquity and power, who had achieved a form of immortality through dark side rituals of an unspeakable nature. When Revan and Malak were finally brought before his throne, they were not met as conquerors or even as worthy rivals. They were met with an overwhelming display of raw power. The Emperor's presence was a crushing weight in the Force, a force of will so potent that it could dominate lesser minds with ease. The confrontation in the throne room was the defining moment of their fall. The Emperor had been aware of them for some time. He had watched Revan's rise during the Mandalorian Wars, seeing not an enemy, but a potential asset of unparalleled value. He did not seek to destroy them. He sought to convert them. He showed them visions of the threats that lay even beyond his own empire, cosmic horrors that he claimed only the order and strength of the Sith could defeat. He appealed to Revan's belief that he alone could protect the galaxy, twisting his sense of responsibility into a justification for tyranny. But it was not persuasion that ultimately broke them. It was a direct assault on their minds. The Emperor, with his mastery of the dark side, shattered their Jedi conditioning. He took the trauma of Malachor V, the compromises they had made, the anger they felt toward the Jedi Council, and amplified those feelings 1,000-fold. He broke their wills, forcing them to their knees, not just physically, but spiritually. In that moment, the heroes of the Republic were erased, and two of the most powerful Sith Lords the galaxy had ever known were born. The analysis of this transformation is crucial. It was not a simple choice to embrace evil. It was a violation, a mental and spiritual domination. The Emperor did not just convince them, he remade them. He saw in Revan a brilliant strategist, and in Malak a powerful enforcer. He anointed them Darth Revan and Darth Malak, and gave them a new mission, to return to the Republic not as its saviors, but as its conquerors. They were to find a legendary Rakatan superweapon known as the Starforge, a factory of immense power that could produce an infinite fleet, and use it to prepare the galaxy for the Emperor's eventual return. Revan and Malak, their minds twisted and their purpose redefined by the Emperor's will, accepted their new roles. They left Dromund Kaas not as prisoners, but as the vanguard of the true Sith invasion. They took with them the fleet of Republic veterans and Jedi, who had followed them into the void. These followers, already scarred by war and isolated from the light, were easily corrupted, becoming the first generation of soldiers and dark acolytes in a new Sith empire. The heroes were gone, and in their place, monsters of their own making, forged in the shadow of the Emperor's throne, were returning home. Chapter 9. The Starforge Imperative. With their minds reshaped by the Sith Emperor's power, Darth Revan and Darth Malak were given their singular, overarching objective: find and control the Starforge. This was not merely a tactical goal. It was the cornerstone of the Emperor's long-term strategy. The question for the newly christened Sith Lords was no longer how to protect the Republic, but how to conquer it efficiently, paving the way for the true Emperor's eventual invasion. The Starforge was a legend, a myth from a forgotten age. It was a colossal, self-sustaining orbital factory, an artifact of the ancient Rakatan Infinite Empire. But it was far more than a simple shipyard. The Starforge was a parasitic entity, a construct that drew energy directly from a star and harnessed the power of the dark side itself. It fed on negative emotions, fear, anger, hatred, and used them to fuel its unimaginable productive capacity. It could create fleets of starships, armies of droids, and weapons of war on a scale that would make any conventional military force obsolete. To control the Starforge was to have the power of infinite war. Darth Revan, his strategic mind now untethered by Jedi morality, embraced this mission with chilling focus. He knew that finding the Starforge required more than a simple search. The Rakata had hidden their creation well, breaking the information needed to find it into pieces, encoded within a series of star maps scattered across the galaxy. Each map contained a fragment of the necessary navigational data. Only by combining all the fragments could the location of the Starforge system be revealed. The initial phase of their return to the galaxy was not a declaration of war, but a clandestine hunt. Revan and Malak, now leaders of their own Sith Empire, used their knowledge of the Republic to move in the shadows. They established secret bases, recruited agents, and began the systematic search for the star maps. Their first discoveries were made on worlds in the Outer Rim, places rich in history and strong in the Force. Korriban, the ancient graveyard world of the Sith, held one map. Dantooine, a peaceful world with a Jedi enclave, held another. The dynamic between the two Sith Lords began to solidify during this period. Revan remained the master strategist, his plans intricate and far-reaching. He saw the Starforge as a tool for a swift, decisive conquest that would preserve the galaxy's infrastructure for the Emperor's eventual rule. Malak, however, was increasingly consumed by the raw power of the dark side. He saw the Starforge not just as a tool, but as the ultimate expression of personal power. He grew more brutal, more impatient, his methods defined by terror and overt cruelty. A subtle rift began to form between them, a difference in philosophy on how best to wield the immense power they now served. This analytical distinction is key to understanding their eventual conflict. Revan's Sith philosophy was one of pragmatic domination, strength through order and efficiency. Malak's was one of personal aggrandizement, strength through fear and destruction. While they worked toward the same goal, their motivations were diverging. Revan sought to build an empire. Malak sought to rule its ashes. With several star maps in their possession, the location of the Starforge was becoming clearer. The hunt was nearing its end. Soon, they would have the means to build their infinite fleet, and the secret war would become an open one. The Republic, still blissfully unaware of the transformation of its greatest heroes, was about to face an enemy that knew all of its weaknesses, led by the very minds that had once been its greatest strength. Chapter 10. The Unseen Enemy. While Revan and Malak hunted for the Starforge, the Republic remained in a state of uneasy peace. The Jedi Council, though deeply troubled by the disappearance of so many of their knights, focused on rebuilding the Order and reinforcing their traditional doctrines. They viewed the Revanchists' defiance as a cautionary tale, a lesson in the dangers of emotional attachment and intervention. They did not, and perhaps could not, conceive of the truth that their former heroes were now quietly building an empire on their borders. The first signs of trouble were subtle, easily dismissed as the lingering chaos of the post-war era. Piracy increased along key trade routes. Communications from isolated Outer Rim colonies went silent. Minor political disputes on distant worlds escalated into violent coups, with new, aggressive regimes suddenly seizing power. To the Republic Senate, these were disparate incidents, the unfortunate but expected turmoil of a galaxy in recovery. They failed to see the pattern, the coordinated effort behind the chaos. This was the genius of Darth Revan's initial strategy. He was waging a shadow war, a campaign of destabilization designed to soften the Republic before the first shot of the open war was even fired. His agents, many of them former Republic officers who had followed him into the unknown regions, infiltrated planetary governments, corporate boards, and military command structures. They sowed discord, assassinated key leaders, and funneled resources to Revan's growing war machine. A chilling set piece from this period was the subversion of the Chirka Corporation, one of the galaxy's largest and most influential conglomerates. Through a combination of bribery, blackmail, and targeted assassinations of its executives, Revan's agents effectively seized control of the corporation from within. Chirka's vast shipping network became a covert transport for Sith troops and supplies. Its weapons manufacturing division began secretly producing advanced technology for Revan's forces. To the rest of the galaxy, Chirka was just conducting business as usual. In reality, it had become a logistical arm of the new Sith Empire. The analysis of this strategy reveals Revan's profound understanding of the Republic's weaknesses. He knew it was not just a military power, but a complex economic and political entity. By targeting its corporations and political institutions, he was attacking its foundations. He was not just preparing to fight its fleets, he was preparing to make it ungovernable, to ensure its collapse from within. This approach was surgically precise, designed to minimize collateral damage to infrastructure he planned to eventually control. Malak, however, found this subtlety frustrating. His preferred method was direct and brutal. On his own initiative, he would orchestrate overt acts of terror, such as the complete destruction of a troublesome mining colony, or the public execution of a planetary governor who resisted Sith influence. While effective in spreading fear, these acts threatened to expose their operations prematurely. Revan was forced to rein in his apprentice's impulses, a source of growing tension between them. Malak saw Revan's restraint not as strategic patience, but as weakness. The unseen enemy was growing stronger with each passing day. The star maps were nearly all found. The location of the Star Forge was within their grasp. The Republic continued its debates. The Jedi continued their meditations, all while a cancer grew within their own borders. The storm was about to break, and the galaxy was utterly unprepared for the revelation of who was truly wielding the lightning. Chapter 11. The Breaking Point. The final star map was located. With its data added to the others, the path to the Starforge system was finally revealed. Darth Revan and Darth Malak had reached the culmination of their quest. They now possessed the key to infinite military power. It was at this moment of triumph, however, that the first true crack appeared in their alliance, and more importantly, in the Sith Emperor's control over his most powerful servant. As they stood on the verge of activating the ancient Rakatan factory, Revan experienced a profound shift in his perspective. Having spent years operating as a Sith Lord, his mind, though twisted by the Emperor, had begun to heal. The strategic part of his intellect, the part that analyzed systems and predicted outcomes, began to apply its cold logic to his own situation. He looked at the Star Forge, a weapon that fed on life and the dark side, and at the Emperor's plan for a galaxy-spanning war, and he saw not strength, but a cycle of self-destruction. He realized that the Emperor's promised order was a lie. It was a path to eternal conflict and stagnation, ruled by a paranoid tyrant. The Emperor had remade Revan, but he had not been able to erase the core of who he was, a brilliant mind that sought not just to win, but to understand. Revan broke free of the Emperor's mental conditioning. The chains of Dromund Kaas shattered, not through an act of light, but through an act of supreme intellectual will. He decided the galaxy did not need a new master in the shadows. It needed one single ruler to impose a lasting peace. He would take the Starforge for himself. He would conquer the Republic, not as the Emperor's pawn, but as its new master. And he would use its might to build a true, lasting empire that could defend against the cosmic threats the Emperor had shown him. This was Revan's secret rebellion. He did not announce it to Malak. He knew his ambitious apprentice, now thoroughly consumed by the dark side, would not understand. Malak craved the power the Emperor offered. Revan now sought to usurp it. Revan began to formulate a new grand strategy, one that involved a carefully managed war against the Republic. He would attack its military, but preserve its industrial base. He would defeat its fleets, but spare its worlds from the kind of orbital bombardment Malak favored. He needed the Republic's infrastructure intact for the empire he planned to build. This schism in intent is critical to understanding the Jedi Civil War that followed. It was not a unified Sith assault. It was a war fought under the leadership of a Dark Lord, who was secretly playing a different game from both his apprentice and his distant master. Revan's goal was conquest and consolidation. Malak's was destruction and dominance. The Emperor's was attrition and preparation. Three conflicting agendas were now at play, all under the same Sith banner. With the Starforge roaring to life, churning out an endless stream of starships and war droids, Darth Revan turned his gaze back toward the galaxy he had once saved. His new Sith empire, built from the remnants of his Republic fleet and bolstered by the dark power of the Starforge, was ready. He was no longer a hero, nor was he the Emperor's slave. He was a new, independent power in the galaxy, a conqueror with his own vision. His first act was to send a message to the Republic, a message delivered by treachery and fire, announcing his return. Chapter 12. The Traitor's Gambit. The Jedi Civil War began not with a formal declaration, but with a devastating act of betrayal that crippled the Republic Navy before it even knew it was at war. The architect of this opening salvo was not Revan or Malak, but one of the Republic's most respected and decorated officers, Admiral Saul Karath. His defection sent a shockwave of disbelief and fear through the Republic's leadership. Saul Karath had been a hero of the Mandalorian Wars, a skilled fleet commander who had fought alongside Revan. He was known for his loyalty and his unwavering commitment to the Republic. The question of why he betrayed everything he had stood for is a complex one. Some records suggest he was captured and tortured by the Sith until his will broke. Others contend that he was persuaded by Revan, his former commander, who convinced him that the Republic was too corrupt and decadent to survive, and that only a new, stronger order could save the galaxy. Whatever the reason, his betrayal was absolute. The first major blow came at the Battle of Forost. The Republic had concentrated a significant portion of its fleet at the Forost shipyards for retrofitting and repair. Admiral Karath, using his high-level security clearances, transmitted the fleet's positions, strengths, and vulnerabilities directly to the Sith. Then, a massive Sith fleet, constructed by the Starforge and led by Darth Malak, dropped out of hyperspace. It was not a battle, it was an ambush. The Republic ships, many of them in dry dock or operating with skeleton crews, were systematically annihilated. The Forost shipyards, a cornerstone of the Republic's naval power, were captured intact. This set piece established the brutal efficiency of the new Sith war machine. They did not just win, they absorbed. The captured shipyards were immediately put to use, supplementing the already prodigious output of the Starforge. The Sith did not just destroy their enemies' assets, they stole them. This was a hallmark of Revan's strategy: turn the Republic's own strength against it. The analysis of the Forost raid reveals its dual purpose. Militarily, it was a crippling blow that gave the Sith an immediate and overwhelming naval advantage. Psychologically, it was even more devastating. The defection of a hero like Saul Karath sowed paranoia and mistrust throughout the Republic military. Officers began to suspect one another, command structures were destabilized. If Saul Karath could turn, who was truly loyal? This fear was a weapon just as potent as any warship, and Revan wielded it with surgical precision. With the Republic fleet in disarray, Revan and Malak pressed their advantage. They launched coordinated assaults on the Corellian Run and the Duro sector, seizing control of vital trade routes and industrial centers. Corporations that had once supplied the Republic were now forced, under threat of annihilation, to supply the Sith. The war was expanding rapidly, and the Republic, reeling from the initial shock, struggled to mount any effective defense. A new, terrifying power had emerged in the galaxy, and it was led by a man who knew every secret, every weakness, and every fear of the Republic he was now intent on conquering. Chapter 13. The Weapon of the Mind. As the Sith war machine carved its way through Republic defenses, it became clear that conventional warfare would not be enough to stop them. The Sith had superior numbers, thanks to the Starforge, and superior intelligence, thanks to defectors and spies. The Republic was on the verge of collapse. In this desperate hour, the Jedi Council was forced to abandon its policy of non-intervention. They committed the full resources of the Jedi Order to the war effort, and with them, they unleashed their most powerful and secret weapon, a young Jedi Knight named Bastila Shan. Bastila possessed a rare and potent Force ability known as battle meditation. It was not a destructive power, but a subtle and overwhelming one. By entering a deep trance, Bastila could reach out with the Force and touch the minds of thousands of soldiers simultaneously. She could bolster the morale and coordination of her allies, allowing them to fight with near-perfect efficiency and preternatural resolve. At the same time, she could sow fear, confusion, and despair in the ranks of her enemies, crippling their will to fight. She was, in effect, a living force multiplier, capable of turning the tide of any battle she participated in. The strategic context was dire. The Republic fleet, demoralized and outgunned, was suffering defeat after defeat. The introduction of Bastila's battle meditation changed the equation. In her first major engagement, a fleet action over the gas giant of Yavin, a beleaguered Republic task force, outnumbered 3-1, was able to hold its ground and even force a Sith withdrawal. The Republic ships moved with an uncanny precision, their pilots anticipating enemy maneuvers, their gunners firing with flawless accuracy. The Sith, in contrast, fell into disarray, their command structure breaking down under a wave of inexplicable dread. This set piece, the Battle of Yavin, demonstrated Bastila's immense value. She became the centerpiece of the Republic's war strategy. A special task force was assigned to protect her, as the Jedi Council knew that Revan and Malak would stop at nothing to capture or kill her. She was a symbol of hope, the Republic's answer to the seemingly unstoppable Sith tide. However, the analysis of relying so heavily on a single asset reveals a significant risk. The Republic's newfound success was dangerously dependent on Bastila. Her power was a crutch, allowing the military to win battles without addressing the underlying strategic and numerical disadvantages they faced. Furthermore, the strain on Bastila herself was immense. The act of battle meditation required incredible concentration and pushed her to the very limits of her connection to the Force. It also made her a beacon in the Force, a shining light that the Dark Lords could easily track. Her success infuriated Darth Malak. While Revan saw her as a strategic asset to be neutralized or captured, Malak saw her as a personal affront. His response was one of characteristic brutality. In a retaliatory strike against a world that had provided sanctuary to Bastila's task force, the planet Telos IV, Malak ordered his new second-in-command, Admiral Karath, to carry out an orbital bombardment. But it was not a military strike. It was an atrocity. Karath targeted cities, refugee camps, and civilian infrastructure, killing millions. The message was clear. Any world that supported Bastila Shan would be erased. The war had entered a new and far more vicious phase. Chapter 14. The Terrace Trap. The war had become a galaxy-spanning chessboard, with Darth Revan and Bastila Shan as the two opposing master players. Revan's strategic genius was matched by Bastila's unique ability to inspire victory through the Force. For every fleet Revan maneuvered, Bastila was there to counter, her battle meditation turning certain defeats into improbable triumphs. Revan knew that to win the war, he had to remove her from the board. The question was how to corner a piece that could sense every move against her. The answer was a trap, one laid with patience and precision. Revan and Malak allowed Republic intelligence to learn of their fleet's flagship, a massive command ship from which Revan personally directed the war. They leaked information suggesting that both Dark Lords would be aboard the vessel as it prepared for a major offensive near the planet Taurus in the Outer Rim. It was an irresistible target. The chance to eliminate both Revan and Malak in a single strike was a gamble the Jedi Council and the Republic High Command felt they had to take. Bastila Shan herself was chosen to lead the mission. A small Jedi strike team, composed of some of the Order's most skilled duelists, would accompany her. Their plan was to board Revan's flagship, fight their way to the bridge, and confront the Sith Lords directly. It was a daring, almost suicidal plan, but with Bastila's battle meditation to aid the Republic fleet providing cover, they believed it could succeed. The set piece was the bridge of Revan's flagship, a vast, dark chamber overlooking the star-dusted void. As the Republic fleet engaged the Sith Armada, Bastila and her Jedi team stormed the vessel. They fought through legions of Sith troopers and dark Jedi apprentices, the Force flowing through them, their lightsabers a blur of color against the ship's gray corridors. They reached the bridge, prepared for the final confrontation. Revan stood waiting for them, his presence in the Force a vortex of cold, confident power. But as the duel began, the trap was sprung. From the bridge of his own nearby flagship, the Leviathan, Darth Malak watched the battle unfold. He saw his master, Revan, locked in combat with Bastila and the Jedi. And in that moment, Malak's ambition, his resentment, and his hunger for power overwhelmed his loyalty. He saw not a master to be defended, but an obstacle to be removed. He gave a single, chilling order to his gunnery officers: open fire on Revan's bridge. The analysis of Malak's betrayal is the story of an apprentice's festering jealousy. He had long stood in Revan's shadow, first as a Jedi, then as a Sith. He believed Revan's strategic restraint was a weakness, a refusal to embrace the full potential of the dark side. By eliminating Revan and the Jedi strike team in one fell swoop, Malak believed he could seize control of the Sith Empire and lead it to a more brutal, more decisive victory. It was the ultimate act of Sith ambition, the student striking down the master to claim his power. A volley of turbolaser fire, green bolts of pure destructive energy, slammed into the bridge of Revan's command ship. The view screen shattered, consoles exploded, and the chamber was engulfed in fire and shrapnel. Bastila and the surviving Jedi were thrown across the deck. Revan, caught at the epicenter of the blast, was mortally wounded, his connection to the Force nearly extinguished. The master of the Sith, the architect of the war, had fallen, not by a Jedi's blade, but by the treachery of his own apprentice. Chapter 15. The Unmaking of a Mind. In the fiery chaos of the destroyed bridge, with Darth Revan lying near death, Bastila Shan made a choice that would alter the course of the war and the fate of the galaxy. She could have fled, saving herself as the flagship broke apart around her. Instead, she reached out with the Force, not to attack, but to preserve. She formed a powerful Force bond with the dying Sith Lord, a link between their minds, and used her own life energy to keep him from the brink of death. As the Republic forces rescued the few survivors of the strike team, they brought with them the unconscious, broken body of their greatest enemy. Darth Malak, now the undisputed master of the Sith, watched from his own bridge, believing both Revan and Bastila to have perished. He declared himself the new Dark Lord of the Sith, and immediately consolidated his power, beginning a reign of terror even more brutal than his masters. He ordered a full-scale blockade and bombardment of the planet Terrace below, a world that had done nothing to provoke him, simply to make a statement, to announce his ascendancy through an act of indiscriminate destruction. Meanwhile, Bastila brought the unconscious Revan before the surviving masters of the Jedi Council at their hidden enclave on Dantooine. The Jedi were faced with a dilemma, unlike any they had ever known. Before them lay the mind that had orchestrated the war, a repository of all the Sith's secrets, strategies, and locations, including the Starforge. But that mind was shattered, a chaotic ruin of trauma, dark-side corruption, and residual memories. Killing him was an option, but the knowledge he possessed was too valuable to lose. The Council conceived a radical, desperate plan, one that skirted the edges of Jedi morality. They decided to rebuild Revan's mind. Using the Force bond Bastila had created as a conduit, they delved into his consciousness. They did not heal it, they erased it. They wiped away his identity, his memories, his personality, everything that made him Darth Revan. They suppressed his immense power in the Force and constructed a new, false identity for him. He was to be a simple ensign, a loyal soldier in the Republic military. It was an act of profound violation, a psychic reprogramming on an unprecedented scale. The analysis of the Council's decision is fraught with ethical complexity. They justified their actions by the desperation of their circumstances. They believed that by creating this blank slate, they could use Revan as a tool to rediscover the very secrets he had once mastered. They hoped that his suppressed memories, his subconscious instincts, would eventually lead them to the Starforge. It was a plan born of pragmatism, but it was also an act of profound manipulation, using the dark side's own methods of mind control against its former master. The newly created persona was placed aboard a Republic cruiser called the Endar Spire. Bastila Shan was also assigned to the ship, tasked with watching over him, to guard the secret of his true identity and to guide his rebirth. The fate of the war now rested on this extraordinary deception. The Jedi Council had taken their greatest enemy, the most feared Sith Lord in a generation, and turned him into their unwitting savior. The question was whether a mind so powerful, so steeped in the dark side, could truly be contained, or if the ghost of Darth Revan would inevitably rise again. Chapter 16. Echoes on the Endar Spire. The war continued under Darth Malak's brutal command. The Republic, deprived of Revan's strategic mind, but now free from his unpredictable tactics, settled into a desperate defense. On the Republic cruiser Endar Spire, a soldier with no memory of his past served quietly, unaware of the universe-altering secret locked within his mind. This was the new Revan, a blank slate, living a life fabricated by the Jedi Council. He knew only his given name, the duties of his post, and a sense of loyalty to the Republic. His guardian, Bastila Shan, kept a careful watch. The Force bond she shared with him was a constant presence, a link that allowed her to monitor his state of mind. It was a heavy burden, a constant reminder of the secret she carried and the person he once was. The crew of the Endar Spire knew only that Bastila was a Jedi of great importance, a hero of the war, and that their mission was to protect her at all costs. The period of quiet did not last. Darth Malak, through his spies and his own powerful connection to the Force, had learned a devastating truth. Bastila Shan had survived. He became obsessed with finding her. Her battle meditation was the one strategic asset the Republic had that he could not counter. He diverted a significant portion of his fleet to hunt her down, a relentless pursuit that spanned a dozen star systems. Finally, his forces cornered the Endar Spire in orbit, above the city planet of Taris. The Sith assault was overwhelming. The Endar Spire was boarded, its corridors becoming a chaotic battleground. It was in this crucible of combat that the first glimmers of Revan's past self began to emerge. The ensign with no memory found himself reacting with an instinct he didn't know he possessed. He fought with a skill that belied his rank, his movements efficient, his tactical awareness uncanny. He was guided by a Republic officer, Trask Ulgo, a brave soldier who sacrificed his own life to ensure the amnesiac hero could reach the escape pods. The set piece was the frantic escape from the dying ship. Revan, guided by the instincts he could not explain, teamed up with a charismatic Republic pilot named Carth Onasi. Carth was a veteran of the Mandalorian Wars, a man whose homeworld had been destroyed by the Sith, leaving him with a deep-seated hatred for them and a profound distrust of anyone who might be hiding secrets. Together, they fought their way to the last escape pod and launched into the atmosphere of Taris, just moments before the Endar Spire was torn apart by turbo-laser fire. The analysis of this event highlights the Jedi Council's gamble. By placing Revan back into the crucible of combat, they had risked reawakening the very instincts they had tried to suppress. His innate connection to the Force, his muscle memory from 1,000 battles, began to surface not as conscious thought, but as pure reflex. He was a weapon, reforged, but not entirely changed. The Council had hoped his new fabricated personality would guide these instincts toward the light. Crashing on the surface of Taris, a world now under martial law by Malak's Sith forces, Revan and Carth were fugitives. They were separated from Bastila, whose own escape pod had landed elsewhere in the sprawling city. Their immediate goal was simple survival, but their greater mission, unknown to either of them at the time, was to find Bastila and escape the Sith-occupied world. The journey of Revan's rediscovery had begun, not in a Jedi temple, but in the grim, neon-lit undercity of a world groaning under the heel of the man who was once his apprentice. Chapter 17. The Gilded Cage of Taris. Taris was a world of vertical extremes. Its surface was a testament to cosmopolitan excess, a planet-wide city of soaring skyscrapers and luxurious apartments, home to the galaxy's elite. But beneath this gleaming facade lay the Undercity, a dark, dangerous labyrinth inhabited by the poor, the forgotten, and the criminal elements that preyed upon them. It was a world that mirrored the Republic itself, a beautiful surface hiding a deep and desperate decay. When Darth Malak blockaded the planet and declared martial law, he turned this gilded cage into a prison for millions. Revan and Carth Onasi, stranded in the Undercity, had to navigate this complex social landscape to survive and find Bastila. Their quest forced them into alliances with a memorable cast of characters who represented the fringes of galactic society. They were aided by Mission Val, a resourceful young Twi'lek street urchin, and her loyal Wookiee protector, Zalbar. Their plight, victims of the criminal gangs that ruled the Undercity, gave Revan a first-hand look at the suffering caused by the galaxy's indifference. Their search for Bastila led them to a swoop race, a high-speed dangerous sport, where they learned she had been captured by one of these gangs, the Black Vulkars. To win her freedom, Revan had to win the Taris Swoop Season Classic, a victory that showcased his suppressed reflexes and uncanny piloting skills. It was another piece of his old self bubbling to the surface. After winning the race and freeing Bastila, their small group had a new problem: escaping a planet under a complete Sith blockade. The key to their escape was a local Mandalorian mercenary named Canderous Ordo. A veteran of the Mandalorian Wars, Canderous had fought against Revan and now found himself living a life of hollow glory on Taris. He was bored, seeking a worthy challenge. He recognized in Revan a warrior spirit and offered a deal: help him steal a fast freighter called the Ebon Hawk from a local crime lord, and he would get them all past the Sith blockade. Canderous's commentary provided a unique perspective, that of a former enemy who respected Revan's military prowess. even if he did not know the full truth of his identity. The analysis of the Terrace section of Revan's journey is that it served as a re-education. Stripped of his memories and his power, he was forced to experience the galaxy from the bottom up. He was no longer a Jedi Master or a Dark Lord, but a refugee relying on the help of the downtrodden. He learned about loyalty from Mission and Zalbar, about honor from Canderous, and about the deep wounds of war from Karth. These experiences began to shape the new person he was becoming, building a foundation of compassion and camaraderie that his former self had lacked. The heist was successful. With the help of a droid, T-3M4, they infiltrated the crime lord's base and stole the Ebon Hawk. With Canderous at the helm and Bastila using the Force to cloud the senses of the Sith fleet, they made a daring run through the blockade. As they jumped to hyperspace, they looked back to see Darth Malak, in a fit of rage at their escape, order his fleet to open fire on the planet. The orbital bombardment began, destroying the city they had just left behind, killing billions in a final, spiteful act of power. Revan and his new companions had escaped, but they carried with them the ashes of another world, sacrificed to Malak's cruelty. Their destination? The Jedi Enclave on Dantooine. Chapter 18. The Dantooine Test. The journey to Dantooine was a tense one. Aboard the Ebon Hawk, a fragile trust was forming between the disparate survivors of Terrace. Karth Onasi remained deeply suspicious, his grief from the destruction of Telos making him wary of anyone with secrets. Bastila Shan carried the immense weight of her own secret, carefully guiding the amnesiac Revan, watching for any sign of his former self. For Revan, the trip was one of discovery. He was a man without a past, surrounded by people whose lives had been defined by it. Upon arriving at the Jedi Enclave on Dantooine, a peaceful, pastoral sanctuary for the Order, Revan was brought before the Jedi Council. Here, the next stage of their plan was put into motion. The Masters, feigning ignorance of his true origins, sensed his powerful, albeit untrained, connection to the Force. They offered him a unique opportunity to be trained as a Jedi. This was the central part of their gamble, to retrain their former enemy in the ways of the light, hoping to mold his raw power into a force for good. The training was an accelerated, intensive process. Revan learned to wield a lightsaber, to touch the Force, and to uphold the Jedi Code. His progress was astonishing, his innate talent shining through. During his training, he and Bastila explored an ancient ruin on Dantooine's plains, a structure built by the mysterious Rakata. Inside, they discovered one of the very star maps that Revan had sought as a Sith Lord. The map revealed itself to them, showing a tantalizing fragment of a larger galactic map. It was during this exploration that Revan began to experience powerful visions. He saw flashes of his past, fleeting images of his time as a Sith Lord, of Malak, and of the Starforge. The Jedi Council interpreted these as a manifestation of the Force, a vision of the enemy's plans. They charged Revan and Bastila with a new mission: to follow the trail laid out by the star map, to find the other pieces of the puzzle, and to locate the Starforge before Malak could use it to destroy the Republic. The analysis of this period reveals the Jedi Council walking a dangerous tightrope. By retraining Revan, they were giving him back the skills and power he had once used to dominate the galaxy. They were betting everything on the belief that his new personality, forged in the struggles on Terrace and guided by their teachings, would be strong enough to resist the inevitable pull of his past. The Force bond with Bastila was their safety net. They believed she could guide him and keep him on the path of the light. With a clear mission, a ship, and a crew, Revan's journey began in earnest. The crew of the Ebon Hawk Karth, Bastila, Canderous, Mission, Zalbar, and the droids T-3M4 was now a formal team, tasked with saving the galaxy. They set out to the worlds hinted at by the star map: the desert planet of Tatooine, the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk, the ocean world of Manan, and the Sith graveyard of Korriban. Revan, the former Dark Lord, was now unwittingly retracing the steps of his own conquest, hunting the secrets he himself had once mastered. The ghosts of his past were waiting for him. Chapter 19. The Pilgrim's Path. The quest for the star maps sent the Ebon Hawk on a pilgrimage across the galaxy to worlds steeped in history, conflict, and the Force. Each planet presented a unique challenge and a piece of the larger puzzle, while also forcing Revan to confront moral dilemmas that would define his new identity. This was no mere treasure hunt. It was a series of trials, testing the foundations of his Jedi retraining. On the desert world of Tatooine, they navigated the treacherous politics between the Cherka Corporation, which was exploiting the planet's resources, and the native Sand People. To gain access to the star map, hidden deep within a krayt dragon's lair, Revan had to earn the trust of the Sand People, learning their culture and history. It was here he acquired the assassin droid HK-47, a forgotten relic of his past whose memory banks were damaged. The droid's dry clinical observations on violence provided a chilling, often darkly humorous, counterpoint to the Jedi mission. On Kashyyyk, the lush Wookiee homeworld, the crew was confronted with the brutal reality of the slave trade, once again perpetrated by Cherka. Zalbar was forced to confront his own painful past, having been exiled for attacking his brother, who had sold out their people to the slavers. Revan had to navigate Wookiee honor and politics, eventually descending into the dangerous Shadowlands to find the star map, proving his worth to the Wookiee chieftains and helping to liberate them from their oppressors. The ocean world of Manaan was a lesson in delicate diplomacy. The planet was the only source of Kolto, a miraculous healing substance vital to the war effort for both the Republic and the Sith. The native Selkath maintained a strict neutrality, selling Kolto to both sides and forbidding any conflict in their underwater city of Ahto. Revan had to conduct a covert investigation into a Sith presence on the planet, eventually discovering the star map in a research station at the bottom of the ocean. His actions here had the potential to plunge the world into war, forcing him to weigh the needs of his mission against the fate of an entire species. Finally, the journey took them to the most dangerous world of all, Korriban, the ancient homeworld of the Sith. To find the star map hidden within the tomb of a long-dead Sith Lord, Revan had to infiltrate the Sith Academy. He posed as a prospective student, undertaking the brutal trials and witnessing firsthand the culture of betrayal, ambition, and fear that defined the Sith Order under Malak's rule. It was a perilous masquerade, surrounded by enemies, where any misstep meant death. The analysis of this galactic search shows it as a crucible for Revan's new self. On each world, he was presented with a choice between the expedient, darker path and the more difficult, lighter one. He could have slaughtered the Sand People, ignored the Wookiee slaves, or seized Manaan's Kolto supply for the Republic. The fact that he consistently chose the path of compassion and diplomacy demonstrated the success of the Jedi Council's plan. The personality they had constructed was taking root. Informed by the lessons of Taris and the teachings of Dantooine, he was becoming a hero in his own right. But with each star map found, his visions grew stronger, more coherent. The ghost of his past was stirring, and Darth Malak, sensing the ripples in the Force, was growing more desperate. He knew someone was following Revan's path. He ordered his fleet to redouble its efforts, to hunt down Bastila and the mysterious Jedi who accompanied her. The race for the final pieces of the puzzle was on, and a direct confrontation was now inevitable. Chapter 20. The Leviathan's Jaws. After securing the fourth star map, the crew of the Ebon Hawk found themselves hunted. Darth Malak, enraged and increasingly paranoid, had realized that Bastila was not only alive, but was also succeeding in a quest that mirrored his own former masters. He dispatched his most trusted subordinate, Admiral Saul Karath, aboard his flagship the Leviathan, with a single, explicit order: capture Bastila Shan and the Jedi accompanying her, at any cost. The trap was sprung, as the Ebon Hawk traveled between star systems. An interdictor-class vessel, a ship capable of pulling others out of hyperspace, ensnared them. The Leviathan was waiting. A tractor beam locked onto the small freighter, pulling it inexorably into the massive warship's hangar bay. For the crew, it was a moment of absolute dread. They were caught, deep in enemy territory, aboard the command ship of the man who had betrayed the Republic and his own friend, Carth Onasi. The confrontation that followed was intensely personal. Carth, Bastila, and Revan were captured and brought to the bridge. There, they stood before Saul Karath. For Carth, it was a moment he had longed for, a chance to face the man responsible for the death of his wife and the destruction of his homeworld, Telos. The dialogue was fraught with bitterness and pain, with Karath attempting to justify his betrayal, arguing that the Republic was weak and that only the Sith's new order could bring lasting stability. Saul subjected them to torture, demanding to know the purpose of their mission. But before he could break them, one of their crewmates, who had avoided capture, managed to free the others. The ship was thrown into chaos as they fought their way back to the Ebon Hawk. The set piece was a running battle through the corridors of the Leviathan, a desperate fight for survival against overwhelming odds. The climax of this escape was the final confrontation between Carth and Saul on the ship's bridge. After a fierce firefight, Carth was victorious, avenging his past, but finding the victory hollow. With his dying words, Saul Karath hinted at a terrible secret, a truth about Revan's identity that would soon be revealed. Just as they thought they were free, Darth Malak himself arrived. He strode onto the bridge, his presence a terrifying storm in the Force. He immediately engaged Revan and Bastila in a lightsaber duel. Malak, his jaw replaced by a metallic prosthesis, spoke with a chilling electronic voice. He mocked Bastila's Jedi ideals and taunted Revan, speaking of their shared past, a past Revan could not remember. It was here, in the heat of battle, that Malak delivered the final, devastating blow. He did not strike with his lightsaber, but with the truth. He revealed to Revan who he truly was. He told him of his past as the charismatic Jedi who led the Revanchists, the hero of the Mandalorian Wars, and finally, the Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Revan, Malak's own master. He recounted the story of his betrayal, of the Jedi's capture, and the Council's mind wipe. The analysis of this revelation is that it was Malak's ultimate act of cruelty. He sought not just to kill Revan, but to destroy his new identity, to shatter the foundation of everything he had become. He wanted to force Revan to see that his heroism was a lie, that the hands which now served the light were the same hands that had once commanded the darkness. The revelation was a psychic explosion, sending Revan reeling, his mind struggling to reconcile two completely opposite identities. As he faltered, Bastila sacrificed herself, holding Malak off long enough for Revan and Carth to escape. She was captured, a prisoner of the new Dark Lord, leaving Revan to grapple with the galaxy-shattering truth of his own existence. Chapter 21. The Shattered Self. The escape from the Leviathan was a somber, silent affair. The Ebon Hawk, battered but spaceworthy, slipped away as Malak's attention was focused on his new prize, Bastila. Aboard the freighter, the atmosphere was thick with shock and disbelief. Revan was adrift, his entire world, his very sense of self, annihilated by Malak's revelation. He was not the person he thought he was. His life was a fabrication, his heroic journey a manipulated charade. Carth Onasi, who had witnessed the confession, was forced to confront his own deep-seated trust issues. The man he had slowly, grudgingly come to respect as a friend and a hero was, in fact, the architect of the war that had taken everything from him. The crew, one by one, was told the truth. Their reactions varied from Candrass Ordo's grim warrior's respect for the legend of Revan to Mission Vow's fearful uncertainty. The found family of the Ebon Hawk was fractured, its central pillar revealed to be their greatest enemy. The question now facing Revan was the most fundamental one a person can ask. Who am I? Was he the Dark Lord, a monster responsible for untold suffering? Or was he the man who had saved the Sand People, freed the Wookiees, and shown compassion on a dozen worlds? He was a paradox, a being of two lives, two identities, locked in a struggle for the soul of one man. It was during this crisis of identity that the Force bond he shared with Bastila became more important than ever. Though she was now a captive, the link between them remained. Through it, Revan could feel her fear, her pain, and her struggle against Malak's attempts to corrupt her. Her plight became his anchor. The need to rescue her, the person who had saved his life and who had guided his rebirth, gave him a purpose beyond his own shattered past. It was the first step toward choosing his own identity. The analysis of this psychological turning point is critical. The Jedi Council had intended to use Revan as a weapon, a tool to be pointed at the Sith. Malak, in his cruelty, had intended to break that tool by revealing its origins, but neither had accounted for the experiences that had shaped Revan's new consciousness. The bonds of friendship he had forged, the acts of kindness he had performed, the compassion he had learned, these were not part of the Council's programming, nor could they be erased by Malak's truth. They were real. They formed the basis for a choice. He was not destined to be the Dark Lord again, nor was he simply the Jedi's pawn. He could choose to be the person he had become. In a pivotal conversation with the crew, he acknowledged his past, but affirmed his commitment to the present. He would not be defined by the monster he was, but by the hero he was trying to be. He chose the light, not because the Jedi told him to, but because his own experiences had shown him it was the right path. With his identity chosen and his resolve hardened, Revan set the Ebon Hawk's course. They would follow the final star map, find the source of the Sith's power, and on their way, they would save Bastila. The final act of the war had begun, and it was now a war for redemption. Chapter 22. The World That Isn't There. The final star map led the Ebon Hawk to a place that did not officially exist on any modern star chart. It was a system shrouded by a powerful disruptor field, a technological marvel that tore ships out of hyperspace and sent them crashing to the planet below. This was the home of the Starforge, the last secret of the Rakatan Infinite Empire. As the Ebon Hawk approached, it too fell victim to the field. The ship's systems failed, and Karth Onasi wrestled with the controls, guiding the freighter to a crash landing on a lush, tropical island on the planet's surface. The world was Lehon, also known as Rakata Prime to its inhabitants. It was a planet teeming with life, but also with a dark, ancient presence in the Force. The crew of the Ebon Hawk found themselves stranded, their ship in need of major repairs, in a place that was clearly the source of the Sith's power. The sky above was a graveyard of starships, a testament to the thousands of vessels that had met the same fate over the millennia. Soon after crashing, they were confronted by the planet's indigenous species, the Rakata. These were the descendants of the builders of the Starforge, a once galaxy-spanning empire that had collapsed in on itself, ravaged by a plague that cut them off from the Force. Now they were divided into warring, primitive tribes. They were hostile, xenophobic, and deeply resentful of off-worlders, whom they blamed for their decline. The immediate stake was survival and escape. Revan had to find a way to repair the Ebon Hawk and disable the disruptor field, so that the Republic fleet, which he had secretly contacted, could follow them and launch an assault on the Starforge. To do this, he had to gain the trust of the Rakata. He learned of their history, of their hubris in creating the Starforge, and how the weapon's dark side energies had corrupted and ultimately destroyed their civilization. The set piece for this part of the journey was the ancient Rakatan temple that stood at the center of the main island. This temple was the control center for the disruptor field and the gateway to the Starforge itself. However, its entrance was sealed, accessible only to those who proved their worth to the Rakatan elders. Revan was forced to navigate the complex tribal politics, siding with one faction to gain the access he needed. He learned that the Rakata were a mirror, a cautionary tale of what happens when power is pursued without wisdom. The analysis of the Rakata reveals them as a fallen people, a living embodiment of the corrosive nature of the dark side. Their story was a direct parallel to the Sith. They had built a technological marvel that fed on death and fear, and in doing so, they had consumed themselves. Their planet was not just the location of the Sith's greatest weapon, it was a warning of its ultimate price. Revan, a man grappling with his own dark past, walked among the ghosts of a future he had almost created for the galaxy. After passing the Rakatan trials, Revan was granted access to the temple. He stood before the entrance, ready to confront the final obstacles between him and the Starforge. But he was not alone. He could feel a familiar presence waiting for him inside. A presence now twisted and cold. Malak had not been idle. He had brought his captive, Bastila, to this place of power, and had succeeded where the Emperor had failed with Revan. He had broken her will. The dark side was waiting inside the temple, and it now wore the face of his friend. Chapter 23. The Fallen Apprentice. Inside the ancient Temple of the Ancients, the air was thick with the energy of the dark side. Revan moved through its silent, echoing corridors, his senses on high alert. He knew he was walking into a confrontation not just with an enemy, but with a friend he had failed to protect. At the summit of the temple, with a view of the Starforge hanging in the sky like a malevolent star, Bastila Shan was waiting for him. She was no longer the proud, duty-bound Jedi Knight he had known. She was cloaked in black, her eyes burning with a cold yellow fire. The dark side had consumed her. Malak had broken her spirit, using torture, lies, and the amplification of her deepest insecurities, her pride, her fear of failure, and her frustration with the Jedi Council's rigid dogma. He had convinced her that the Jedi were weak, that their compassion was a flaw, and that true strength lay in embracing one's passions and power. He had made her his new apprentice. The confrontation at the temple summit was a battle of ideologies. Bastila, now a Sith, tried to tempt Revan. She spoke of the power they could have together. She revealed that it was Revan, in his past life, who had first conceived of a new Sith empire, a vision she now believed in. She urged him to reclaim his mantle as the Dark Lord, to cast aside the weakness of the Jedi, and to rule the galaxy with her at his side. She offered him the power he had once commanded, the empire he had once built. It was the ultimate temptation. This set piece was not just a physical duel, but a struggle for Revan's soul. Here was the embodiment of all his past sins, offering him a return to glory. The analysis of Bastila's fall is that it was not born of pure evil, but of manipulated pain. Malak preyed on her inherent belief that she knew best, a pride that had often put her at odds with her Jedi masters. He twisted her sense of duty into a desire for control, her power of battle meditation into a tool for conquest. She fell not because she was weak, but because her strength was misdirected by a master of manipulation. Revan refused her offer. He had made his choice on the Ebon Hawk. He was no longer the Dark Lord. He affirmed his identity as a Jedi and his commitment to the light. His refusal enraged Bastila, and their lightsabers clashed. The duel was a whirlwind of emotion. Revan fighting to save his friend, Bastila fighting to convert or destroy the man she felt had abandoned his own greatness. Revan defeated her, but he did not kill her. He disarmed her, leaving her vulnerable. But the dark side's grip was strong. As the Republic fleet, now able to enter the system after Revan disabled the disruptor field, began its assault on the Starforge, Bastila fled. She went to the Starforge itself, to use her battle meditation not for the Republic, but against them. She would stand by Malak's side and use her great power to ensure the Sith's victory. Revan was left with a terrible choice. To stop Malak, he would have to board the Starforge And to save the Republic, he would have to confront Bastila one last time, knowing that this time he might not be able to save her. Chapter 24. The Battle of the Starforge. The final battle of the Jedi Civil War was fought in the skies above Rakata Prime. It was a confrontation on a scale that dwarfed even the final battle of the Mandalorian Wars. On one side was the Republic fleet, a courageous but outnumbered force, led by Admiral Forn Dodana and Master Vandar Tokare of the Jedi Council. On the other was the infinite fleet of the Sith, an endless stream of warships pouring forth from the Starforge, their efforts coordinated and amplified by the dark side battle meditation of the fallen Bastila Shan. The strategic context was desperate. The Republic knew this was their last chance. If they failed here, the Starforge would continue to produce ships until the entire galaxy was overwhelmed. Their mission was twofold: engage and destroy the Sith fleet, and support a small strike force led by Revan in boarding the Starforge itself. Revan's objective was to fight his way to the heart of the station, confront Darth Malak, and break Bastila's dark meditation. Revan and his chosen companions from the Ebon Hawk flew through the maelstrom of the battle, dodging turbo-laser fire and swarms of Sith fighters. They successfully boarded the massive orbital factory. Inside, the Starforge was a nightmarish vision of industrial horror. Automated assembly lines produced advanced war droids at an impossible rate. The very walls seemed to hum with the energy of the dark side, feeding on the fear and hatred of the battle raging outside. It was a fortress and a factory, a weapon that armed itself. The journey through the Starforge was a relentless assault. Revan and his team fought through legions of Sith troopers, dark Jedi, and advanced combat droids. It was a microcosm of the entire war, a final brutal push against the forces of darkness. As they fought deeper into the station, Revan reached out with the Force, searching for the two minds he had come to confront, Malak and Bastila. The turning point within the station came when Revan found Bastila on the Starforge's command deck. She stood amidst the chaos, a conduit for the dark side. Her eyes closed in concentration as she directed the Sith fleet with her mind. The duel that followed was the emotional climax of their journey. Revan did not fight to win. He fought to redeem. He deflected her attacks while speaking to her through their Force bond. He reminded her of her own teachings, of the compassion she had shown him, of the person she used to be. He professed his love for her, not as a weakness, but as a strength and anchor to the light. The analysis of Bastila's redemption is that it was a triumph of connection over corruption. Malak had broken her by isolating her and feeding her fears. Revan saved her by reaffirming their bond and appealing to the goodness that was still within her. His words, empowered by the love they shared, found a crack in the dark side's hold. She faltered, the hate receding, replaced by confusion and regret. She broke free of Malak's control. Her journey through darkness was over. With her will her own once more, she made a choice. She would atone. She turned her battle meditation back to the light, reaching out not to the Sith, but to the Republic fleet. In an instant, the tide of the battle outside began to turn. The demoralized Republic forces were filled with a new hope and an uncanny coordination, while the Sith fleet fell into chaos. Bastila had been redeemed, and in doing so, had given the Republic a fighting chance. But the war was not over. Revan still had to face the master of the Starforge, his former friend Darth Malak. Chapter 25. The Heart of the Forge. With Bastila redeemed, and the battle outside turning in the Republic's favor, Revan descended into the heart of the Starforge to confront Darth Malak. The final duel took place in the station's viewing chamber, a vast circular room that overlooked the star that the Forge was slowly consuming. It was a fitting arena for the end of their long and tragic story, a place of immense power and ultimate destruction. Malak was waiting, his red lightsaber humming with menace. He was more powerful than ever, having spent months drawing on the Starforge's dark side energies. The station fed him, amplified his hatred and his strength. He was no longer just a Sith Lord. He was an extension of the Starforge itself. The duel began with a furious clash of blades, the red of Malak's saber against the chosen color of Revan's. But Malak had a final, horrific advantage. The Starforge was not just his throne room, it was his sanctuary. Along the walls of the chamber were several Jedi, suspended in stasis pods. They were captives, Jedi who had been captured throughout the war. Malak had been keeping them alive for this very purpose. Whenever Revan managed to wound him, Malak would draw on the life force of one of the captive Jedi, healing his own injuries and sacrificing the Jedi in the process. It was an act of supreme vampiric evil, a demonstration of how completely he had been consumed by the dark side's parasitic nature. This set piece transformed the duel from a simple contest of skill into a race against time and a moral test. To defeat Malak, Revan had to find a way to counter this horrific power. He realized he could not simply overpower his former apprentice. He had to sever Malak's connection to his batteries. Using his own knowledge of the Force, Revan was able to disrupt the energy flow, using the Jedi technique of force stasis on the pods, effectively cutting Malak off from his source of renewal. The analysis of Malak's final moments is a study in the emptiness of the dark side. Deprived of his unnatural advantage, he was finally vulnerable. As Revan struck the final blow, Malak collapsed, his body broken, his connection to the Force fading. In his last words, he expressed a moment of profound, tragic clarity. He spoke of the path Revan had set them on, the path of the Conqueror. He admitted that he knew he would have followed that path into darkness, even without the Emperor's influence. He died alone, in the heart of the weapon he had coveted, admitting that in the end, his power had brought him nothing but emptiness. He lamented his choices and then was gone. With Malak's death, the Starforge began to collapse. The dark side energies that held it together, no longer focused by a powerful master, began to run wild. The station was tearing itself apart. The Republic fleet, under Bastila's guidance, focused its fire on the station's critical systems, accelerating its destruction. Revan had to escape. He fought his way back to the hangar bay, reuniting with his companions. They boarded the Ebon Hawk and fled the dying station just as it was consumed in a final, brilliant explosion. Its dark power collapsing into the star it had fed upon for so long. The Jedi Civil War was over. Epilogue: The Unfinished War. The destruction of the Starforge and the death of Darth Malak sent a shockwave through the Sith Empire. Leaderless and cut off from their source of infinite reinforcements, the Sith fleets fractured. Some commanders surrendered, others fled into the Outer Rim, and many turned on each other in a series of bloody power struggles. The war was effectively over. The Republic, though grievously wounded, had survived. Revan, Bastila, and the crew of the Ebon Hawk were hailed as saviors. A grand ceremony was held, honoring them as heroes of the Republic. The Jedi Council, in a rare admission of their own fallibility, acknowledged the wisdom of Revan's choices and welcomed him back into the Order as the prodigal knight. The schism that had torn the Order apart was healed, but the scars remained. The Jedi had been decimated, their numbers critically low, their temples filled with the ghosts of those lost first to the Mandalorian Wars and then to Revan's own Sith Empire. In the aftermath, Revan's memories of his time in the unknown regions began to return more fully. He remembered not just his fall, but the power that had caused it, the true Sith Emperor and his hidden empire. He realized that the Jedi Civil War, as devastating as it was, had been merely a proxy conflict, a precursor to a far greater invasion that was still to come. He understood that his own empire, under his original design, had been meant to be a bulwark against this threat. His mission was not yet complete. After a short time spent with his friends and with Bastila, with whom he had forged a deep and lasting bond, Revan made a difficult choice. He could not stay. He could not rest, while the true enemy still lurked in the shadows. He said his farewells and, taking the Ebon Hawk, he once again departed for the unknown regions. He went alone this time, to confront the emperor he had once served, to finish the war he had started so long ago. He vanished from the sight of the galaxy, leaving behind a legend, a legacy of a man who had been a hero, a villain, and a hero once more. The galaxy he left behind was a fragile one. The Republic began the slow, arduous process of reconstruction, but the Force was out of balance. The wounds from the wars ran deep. In the shadows, new threats began to coalesce, born from the echoes of Malachor V and the trauma of the Jedi Civil War. A former Jedi Master, exiled for her role in training Revan, began to preach a new, dangerous philosophy, one that saw the Force itself as the ultimate enemy. Two other figures, wounds in the Force-given form, began their own dark pilgrimages. One, a being of pure pain, who had cheated death through his mastery of suffering, and another a being of pure hunger, who consumed entire worlds to sate his endless void. The shadows were gathering again, waiting for another exile, another lost Jedi, to be drawn into the coming darkness. Revan's war was over, but the galaxy's peace would be short-lived.